We have several people from several countries, so today mostly things will go in English. Yes, I would like to welcome everybody here to Oslo, to the first international conference on boys, men and fathers' life and gender equality challenges. This conference is the most ambitious arrangement in the history of Men's Forum. And we have never had an arrangement with this number of people. And we are very happy to see so many people here today. And we are especially happy to present the speakers of today, and especially Warren Farrell and Karen Straughan, who comes all the way from United States and Canada. But why? Why are we here? Do we really need to focus on boys and men's issues? Are there any issues worth mentioning regarding boys and men when we are discussing gender equality? Is Warren Farrell right when he's describing the challenges of boys and men today in his latest book, The Boy Crisis, which, by the way, you can buy at the entrance? Or are we just a bunch of whining, pathetic men dissatisfied with the last decades of evolution within gender equality, as some feminists like to claim? If we look at recent research and statistics, the answer is clearly no. Unfortunately, when someone dares to stick their head out and tries to bring attention to the fact that gender issues also apply to boys and men, they risk being ridiculed in public by self-proclaimed feminists. When the documentary, The Gender Battle, was shown on national television, numerous women were provoked because someone dared to claim that also boys and men have their struggles in today's society. And recently, the last few weeks, the author of the book My Life as a Man, Øystein Stene, wrote a feature article about issues boys and men struggle with today. And there were some reactions on that. Shortly after, Lene Vikander, she's a known Norwegian feminist, she came with a reply doing her best to mock Stene without contradicting any of the issues Stene addressed in his article. This time, however, even other feminists came to defend Stene and addressed the complete lack of good manners from Vikander. So I think that proves that in the future, looks good, feminists and maybe we will work for the same goal in the future, hopefully. But way too often, we see the use of various number of master suppression techniques when someone tries to set focus on boys, men and fathers' gender equality challenges. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the reasons why we need a conference like the one we're having here today. Discrimination of women in the past cannot justify ignoring the gender equality challenges of boys and men today. And on this note, I would like to finish off with introducing our Deputy Chairman, Guttorm Grundt, and he will introduce today's speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. And before I say anything else, I'd give the word and attention to Kenneth, who shows a small film, short film.
fatherless strength, the size of a king that can rule in the heavens, could make him feel safe and complete once again. He searches his world, find heroes to lean on, abandons his strength not to lose their support. The laws of our fathers, disease of our times, an invisible army of lost boys all around. Inside a man, a boy is still yearning to feel the delight of fatherless strength, the size of a king that can rule in the heavens, could make him feel safe and complete once again. And again disappointed, he might look for a new one, or finally feel the death of his whole. The loss of our fathers, the disease of our times, an invisible army of lost boys all around.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. That was beautiful, wasn't it? Now, I'd like to mention just that the speaker in the first place, that was our chairman of Mannsdagen, that was Arne Børke. Thank you very much for the introduction. And our next speaker is a politician from Oslo, but he sits in the parliament. And he is also the chairman of the sport club Grorud. And he is a champion for the young boys and girls and the young people in Groruddalen. So he is really engaged about the same thing as us. So thank you, Jan. Are you here? Yes. Great. Come forward. Jan Bøhler, the word is yours.
Hallo. Må jeg sette fra meg litt her. Jeg var ute og spilte med bandet mitt I går kveld, og jeg fortalte jeg skulle, det manneband da. Jeg har et jenteband faktisk også, så det veldig orden på tinga. Men vi var ute og spilte og sa jeg skulle hit, og de foreslo at jeg skulle begynne med This is a man's world. Så sa jeg at det var kanskje 50 år siden, og spørs om jeg ikke gir noen vann på mølla da. Men vi snakket litt videre, og en ting som vi var opptatt av, det det at det disse nære tingene, det det at jentene, de sier mer og mer, og jenter I liksom høye posisjoner, når de skal ta I, så sier de, ikke kødd med meg. Og så det altså det synes, og jeg jo vant til å snakke liksom bredt Groruddalen, ikke sant, og østkantdialekt, og vi ikke sånn prippende på språket, men akkurat det at de skal snakke sånn om kødden vår, det vi ikke tilhenger av. Sånn at det vil vi gjerne at man ikke skal ha liksom en språkbruk som nedlatende om noe av det viktigste vi har. Og jeg husker jeg prøvde en gang I et humorprogram å si, altså jeg sa ordet som F-ordet, altså det jo sånn, jeg kvier meg for det, men det var en humorist som fikk meg til å gjøre, en komiker som fikk meg til å gjøre, si fitte da, på TV. Og da ble det påtalt I stortingsgruppa, ikke sant? Men ikke kødd med meg, det kan sies I alle slags debatter og mer og mer. Så det noe med språkbruken. Og hvis man driver med kriminalitet, som jeg jobber jo med I justiskomiteen, så sier man at vi skal ta gjerningsmennene. Og det det ingen som reagerer på, om vi sier da gjerningsmennene, ikke sant? Det ikke noe diskriminerende, for det selvsagt mannfolka som holder på med sånt. Men hvis vi sier, jeg formann, eller jeg talsmann, da blir det baluba. For da skal det være talsperson og leder og sånn, ikke de gamle ordene som formann. Sånn at altså, det går helt ned I språket, disse tingene. Og for å ta liksom mer av min hverdag, altså på Stortinget så det sånn at når man skal inn I stortingssalen og på talestolen og sånn, så skal gutta veldig strengt, altså gå I dress, kan ikke gå sånn. På noen måte, så dette en fri dag da, til å gå som jeg vil I Mannsforum. Men kan ikke gå sånn. Altså jeg prøvde en gang å gå I en pen strikkejakke, en gang siden høsten 2005, en pen strikkejakke I stortingssalen med hvit skjorte under, ble straks påtalt av sekretæren, kom bort til meg og påtalte. Mens jentene I stortingssalen, de kan gå I alle mulige bluser, kjoler, helt egentlig fritt antrekk. Så det ingen påtale, for det liksom jentene. Så dette gnager på meg, altså, disse tingene I hverdagen. Men jeg skal komme over på de mer litt sånn større spørsmålene da. Og det jo for meg sånn at jeg bare skal ta og sett på. Et lite øyeblikk bare, jeg skal ordne. Det var noen som ville at jeg skulle skrive en artikkel om hva jeg sier her, og det så da det bedre å ta opp det jeg sier, så kan jeg skrive det. Jeg pleier ikke å skrive ut foredrag. Men sånn som jeg tenker da, så det, altså, vi som opptatt av menns sak, vi må prøve å ta de sakene som treffer flest mulig I samfunnet. For vi kan lett kjøre oss fast I litt sånn sære debatter med disse ekstreme kvinnekjemperne, som skal krangle på alt mulig, og så kan vi liksom havne inn I masse debattinnlegg og sirkle med dem, uten at det akkurat det som når ut til den store befolkningen. Da. At vi må passe på å ikke få sånne interne debatter for spesielt interesserte, men prøve å nå ut med de store temaene, mener jeg. Og jeg ser jo noen av de sakene som Mannsforum reiser jo absolutt av den arten, sånn som samværsrett og så videre, og barneloven og sånn. Men jeg vil ta litt saker fra mitt ståsted, altså saker jeg jobbet med, som jeg synes viktige og bør få en større plass. Det første jeg da vil nevne, det gutta som faller utenfor I samfunnet. Altså hvis man ser på de som dropper ut av videregående skole, sånn som I Oslo, så fikk jeg endelig tall nå før jul I fjor, etter å ha mast på det I flere år, for hvor mange som dropper ut av skolen, for eksempel på Furuholmen, på Rommen, på Haugenstua, ute på Holmlia, ikke sant? På Tøyen, og så videre. Altså de områdene I byen som mest utsatte. Og der viste det seg jo at, for eksempel på de som var aller høyest, Rommen, Fossum-området, så lå det oppe I opp mot 48% som dropper ut av skolen. Og der, altså gutta ligger, det en 10-15 og noen områder over 15% flere gutter som dropper ut enn jenter. Så gutta ligger da opp i 55-60% som dropper ut av skolen. Og de altså de problemene som Mannsforum tar opp med rus, altså 3 ganger så mange menn som rammes av rus og så videre. 9 av 10 menn som sitter i fengsel 9 av 10 av de som sitter i fengsel menn. De problemene der, de handler jo om dette her. At de dropper ut av skolen, og dette har pågått siden Reform 94. Og Reform 94 en reform som egentlig veldig, veldig lite positiv, da, for å si det pent, for de gutta som praktisk anlagte, for deres fremtid. Fordi at alle skal inn i studiespesialisering, ikke sant? Og selv yrkesfagene det lagt opp til mye teori. Sånn at de som dropper ut av skolen, som går rundt på Fossum og Rommen, eller på Furuset, eller på Stovner i dag, av de gutta som altså 50-60% dropper ut av skolen i disse områdene. Det gutter med lite evne til å ta opp sin sak, ikke sant? Og det som har skjedd i de senere årene jo at det blitt enda mer dogmatisk på at alle skal gå i videregående skole. Alle skal fullføre videregående. Og altså regjeringen har avskaffet den ordningen med tiltaksmidler ned til 16 år, sånn det ingen som kommer på tiltak før de over 18 år. Og det betyr at man har ikke noe å tilby disse som dropper ut av skolen, disse gutta som dropper ut av skolen. Disse 55-60% i de utsatte områdene i byen vår. Og de kommer fort ut å kjøre, altså, for da rundt hjørnet så venter det kriminelle gjenger som skal ha dem med på narkotikasalg, eller å banke opp noen, eller å oppbevare våpen for dem, eller andre ting som de kan tjene 10 000 raske kroner på. Og komme hjem til familien og være store karer. Sånn at og Oslo kommune også, bydelen i Oslo, det nesten ikke tiltak for de som dropper ut av videregående skole. For man holder liksom dogmatisk på at det skal enten løses ved tidlig innsats, som man sier, altså i grunnskolen, i barnehagen og sånt, og man skal da forebygge det, men man da nekter å ta inn over seg det faktum at hvor mange tiltak man har gjort, for eksempel 10-årig skole, hvor mange tiltak man har gjort gratis kjernetid i barnehager og så videre, så fortsetter den drop-off-andelen å ligge omtrent like høyt. Og den har økt i disse utsatte områdene, i noen av dem. Sånn at hvem det som taler dem sak? Jeg merker at når jeg står og snakker om dette på Stortinget, snakker om de gutta som dropper ut, så det helt... Altså det er veldig få reaksjoner i noe som helst parti. Og regjeringen kan kutte ut tiltakspenger ned til 16 år, altså for disse gutta som går rundt og blir kriminelle, eller mange av dem dessverre faller utenfor og blir det, eller havner i rusproblemer eller annet. Ingen reaksjoner nesten. Jeg vet ikke om dere har lagt merke til noen reaksjoner i media på det, eller i politikken. Jeg holder på med sånne ting, og jeg føler liksom jeg trenger noen som vil stå opp for gutta, for mennene, og som skjønner at dette har et perspektiv, for hvis det hadde vært et stort flertall jenter som droppet ut, jeg tror diskusjonen ville blitt tatt på en annen måte. Og ikke for det, altså det bra at den ville det, men vi har en stor missing link her. Og det samme i diskusjonen om, altså jeg prøver å ta opp her i dag mer det som jeg erfarer da, i mitt arbeid og mine omgivelser, og håper det kan gi dere litt, i tillegg til mange av de viktige perspektivene som kommer utover dagen. Og i mine omgivelser så kjenner jeg også da mange innvandrermenn, innvandrergutter, som jeg møter hver dag, ikke sant? Jeg bor i blokk hvor det flertall med innvandrerbakgrunn, har gjort det nå, siden det ble sånn i Groruddalen, og det jo mange år nå. Og altså, vi har bevegelser som har tatt opp jentenes situasjon i innvandrermiljøene, og det veldig bra, altså født fri og så videre. Veldig ikke sant? Stor sak i samfunnet. Men guttas situasjon, innvandrermennene, innvandrerguttas situasjon, blir veldig lite diskutert. Og de jo i samme, altså de gutta som begynner å bli voksne, som jeg kjenner, i samme situasjon som jentene, på den måten at storfamilien, klanen, har også, når det arrangert ekteskap med sterkt press, det bestemt hvem de skal gifte seg med, så det selvsagt ikke bare jentene det bestemt for, det bestemt for gutta også. Men vi snakker veldig lite om de gutta det bestemt for, men vi snakker om jentene. Og det veldig fint at vi snakker om jentene, men vi må snakke om gutta, for de går rundt og, altså det også bestemt hvem de skal gifte seg med, og de har heller ikke noe valg. De kan ha norske kjærester og sånn, men Når det kommer til ekteskap, alvor, det familien, det må du holde hemmelig for familien hvis det jenter med norsk bakgrunn som kjæreste. Når det kommer til det alvorlige ekteskapet, hvem man skal bli ordentlig sammen med, så det bestemt. I veldig mange av de miljøene. Arrangerte ekteskap har vi jo ikke forbudt i Norge. Vi har forbudt tvangsekteskap, altså det når man bortføres, at det maktmidler som settes inn, ikke sant? Men det jo går det an, jeg vet vel knapt nok at det har vært mulig at det har vært prøvd en gang for retten hvis det ekstremt press, uten at man bruker direkte makt, men arrangerte ekteskap i det vide og brede det ikke noe ordentlig lovhjemmel for å ta tak i Norge. Og jeg har foreslått det på Stortinget, og foreløpig har regjeringen mer sagt sånn, det skal vi vurdere og sånt, og skal jo presse på det, men det vanlig at man vurderer ting i veldig mange år. Sånne perspektiver da, innvandrermennas situasjon, de som dropper ut fra skolens situasjon, alle de gutta, og også det som jeg har jobbet kanskje mest med på Stortinget, det menns helse. Fordi at jeg mener at det veldig påfallende hvordan de helseproblemene som menn rammes av, altså det jo menn dør jo i gjennomsnitt i landet 6-7 år tidligere enn damer, og på østkanten i Oslo så det jo bydeler hvor det 11-12 år i leveforskjell mellom menn og jenter damer på vestkanten. Sånn at forskjellen i levealder stor, og grunnene til det ligger jo i bestemte sykdommer som rammer mannfolk spesielt. Altså det alle de sykdommene som man snakker veldig lite om, som prostatakreft, alle slags sånne ulike underlivssykdommer, det lungekreft, det kols. Kols altså en lungesykdom. Det for eksempel 3800, tror jeg det tallet, altså det varierer, men mellom 3 og 4000 som dør årlig av prostatakreft, dør av eller med, hvor det en viktig faktor. Og jeg har prøvd nå siden, jeg tror jeg så på sånn fra Stortinget, begynte i 2007 med å ta opp da med Sylvia Brustad, hva vi kan gjøre for å få bedre behandlingsmetode for det. Hvis man har mistanke om det, hvordan man skal gå fram. Og det altså, man trår vann og trår vann og trår vann. Ennå det ikke noe svar på det, hva du skal gjøre for å teste deg, eller skrine deg, eller undersøke deg i forhold til det. Noe ordentlig råd til menn om hva vi gjør. I hvert fall en klar beskjed. Og det samme, altså for lungekreft, det dør 1300 menn cirka i året, rundt der, 1300-1400, så det har variert fra år til år, av lungekreft i Norge. Og det dør kvinner, og etter hvert som de har begynt å røyke mer. Men der det heller ingen, og det dødelig. Og hvis man oppdager lungekreft tidlig, så kan man operere, kan gjøre noe. Men hvis man ikke oppdager det tidlig nok, så man dessverre ferdig. I hvert fall 95%. Og det som at når jeg har jobbet med de sykdommene som rammer menn spesielt, sånn som prostatakreft, lungekreft, jeg har jobbet med de som var asbestarbeidere frem til det ble forbudt i 1980. Det menn, ikke sant? Det dør 200-400 menn nå per år på grunn av at de har jobbet med asbest og får lungekreft. For det slår ut så mange år etterpå at de bedriftslegene som jobbet med det den gangen, og som har fulgt med på det, de har kommet og varskot meg på Stortinget om at nå det jo 200-400 menn hvert år som dør av lungekreft på grunn av at de jobbet med asbest. De hadde rett til undersøkelser, men det ikke blitt fulgt opp, ikke blitt gjennomført, og de sitter der og svinner stille hen da. Og jeg har tatt opp det på Stortinget, liksom, nå har jeg vært pågående på det de siste 3-4 årene, og det en sånn stillhet, akkurat som jeg sa, stillhet på de andre spørsmålene. Så det blir, altså det som det jo bra at det liksom, når man jobber med brystkreft, når man jobber med livmorhalskreft, som jentesykdommer, så det full innsats. Og det bra at det da kommer vaksinasjon, ikke sant, mot livmorhalskreft, det mammografi i forhold til brystkreft, som riktignok omdiskutert. Argumenter for og mot, akkurat som det argumenter for og mot screening eller undersøkelser av lungekreft, forebyggende undersøkelser, eller av prostatakreft. Argumenter for og mot. Men argumentene for og mot har, når det gjelder brystkreft og kvinner, likevel ført til at man fortsetter å gjøre det, selv om mange advarer. Det for mange som blir redde unødvendig, og det for mange unødvendige inngrep og sånn. Ikke sant, det har vært evalueringer. Men da seirer likevel de som vil at det skal være fortsatt mammografi. Og det bra. Eller jeg tror det kan være bra. uten at jeg er noen legespesialist. Men når det kommer til de typiske mannesykdommene, altså prostatakreft, lungekreft og de andre spesielle mannesykdommene, så vipper pendelen andre veien. At det er lite fokus, man kommer ikke fram til nye behandlingsmetoder, og man kommer ikke fram til å bli enighet om former for screening, undersøkelser, som kan gjøre at vi får gjort mer for mannfolka også, får hjulpet dem tidligere og får redda flere liv. Sånn at jeg mener at, nå ser jeg sjefen står oppreist, så da er det bare å pakke sammen, men i hvert fall så mener jeg at vi må mer og mer prøve å ta opp de store tingene som angår alle mannfolk i landet. Og det er, altså, dette forumet her, Mannsforum, er de jeg har virkelig sett at dere har hatt grunn til å være frustrert i mange år. At dere har stått på og ikke blitt hørt. Og dere fortjener all ære for den innsatsen, og jeg støtter de kravene dere reiser. Men jeg skulle også ønske at vi mer og mer greier å utvide sakene våre, og greier å utvide slagkraften og engasjere mannfolk i hele landet, sånn at det blir kraft, blir liv, at man ikke opplever at når det er mannedagen og man hører på nyheten i morgen, så er det ikke et ord om at det er den internasjonale mannedagen, mens hadde det vært kvinnedagen, så er det jo, hele sendingen er jo via til det, holdt jeg på å si. Sånn at vi har en stor jobb å gjøre for mannfolka. Tusen takk til Mannsforum. Jeg gleder meg til å følge arrangementet utover dagen. Takk for meg.
Ja, fantastisk å ha sånne politikere på Stortinget. Jeg skulle bare ønske at det var flere av de. Det kommer en politiker fra Danmark senere i programmet som vil liksom plukke opp tråden din, Jan, og si at det skjer noe også der. Så jeg håper at dere kan ta en prat etterpå, slik at vi kan, gutta kan begynne å samarbeide også landene imellom om disse sakene, akkurat som kvinnene har gjort i alle år. Ja, det var det. Jeg beklager at jeg må reise meg og liksom bryte litt av, fordi at vi har et tett program. Det er mange som har veldig mye viktig å si. Og neste taler, det er Warren Farrell. He has come all the way from California, America, to our country. In November, I think he misses the sun, but he will shine here today, I promise you, you know. And he's an author, he's written books, 2 books I remember. The one is the Myth of Male Power, and then the last book is the Boy Crisis. He's a family consultant and a family therapist, and then he is also a political scientist. So he's got all the right things, and he's famous in America, and after today you'll be famous in Norway. Welcome, Warren Farrell.
Thank you. Yes, this is it. Thanks. Yes, that's perfect. Thanks. Thank you. Before I start, I'd just like to really acknowledge the people who are the real people who count here, really. And that is Dag Furuholmen, who's put in many, many months, contacted me almost a year ago and has worked on the details of this conference, along with Guttorm Grønt, who you've just heard speak, and Jan Olaf, who is back there, the handsome one that's standing. So I'd like you to stand, let's just stand and give them the ovation that they deserve. They've really... Well, at least I get one standing ovation. Before I talk about the boy crisis, I just want to give a couple of caveats. One is that there's some good news for boys. And the good news is you can see almost every weekend in a park boys' fathers and girls' fathers being more devoted to them than my father ever was to me, or almost any group of fathers was in any significant numbers in any past generation. And so we can really see that those boys are what I call dad-enriched boys, and those girls, dad-enriched girls. And we see you'll hear during today as a very significant difference in the outcome of these dad-enriched boys and girls than anyone really has known or documented in the past. The second caveat is that I want to make it really clear that some of the hardest working people that I have met in my lifetime have been single moms. And many children of single moms do just fine. And so this is not a categorization that fits everybody. What I'm talking about here today is what is likely, but not what is inevitable. It's about what has created a global crisis for tens of millions of boys, but not all boys. And so I want to make those distinctions clear. Finally, at the end of my presentation, I'll have two things that I think you'll enjoy. One is some extremely hopeful news, almost amazing news, and then that I'll be sharing here today for the first time in any presentation. And then second, I'll be doing two 100% audience participation experiences. So get yourself ready to move around and talk a little bit also after I bore you. So let's start out with the boy crisis and why and how it is not just a U.S. crisis, but a global crisis. More men in the United Kingdom have died by suicide in the past year than all British soldiers fighting in all wars since 1945. And all the documentation for everything I'm talking about is in the boy crisis, but I don't want to bore you with that here now. Developed nations each have unique colloquial terms for what's happening to boys and girls. So I'll just ask you to illustrate that. Let's have everyone just stand up by your chair for a moment. And if you're not by a chair, try to stand near a chair if you find one, if you would. In China, the phrase that is, the term that is used is girls up. So I'd like to have all the women just stand on the chairs. If stand on the chair, if you're next to somebody, please support her to stand on the chair. In China, the motto is girls up, boys down. I'd like you to sit down, men, boys. This is a visual experience of the global boy crisis. Girls up, boys down. Women up, men down. That's the Chinese colloquial term. Thank you for standing up, women. Give them a hand. In Japan, the phrase that they use is herbivores. I'm not going to ask you to eat vegetables, or socially isolated to describe the new generation of boys. And in many European countries, you probably know that one of the acronyms is NEET, N-E-E-T, for young men who are not in education, employment, or training. In the U.S., a lot of the emphasis is on male shaming. Toxic masculinity is used ubiquitously. Boys are being derided for male privilege rather than thanked for male sacrifice. Whether saving our country in war or saving our homes in floods and fires, which we have a lot of in California. These boys, these young men, used to be called heroes. But now they're often derided as having either toxic masculinity or they go to school and they hear that the future is what? Female. The future is female. That doesn't really empower boys to feel hopeful about their future. A large study from the UK finds that boys' IQs have dropped 15 points since the 1980s. In the Boy Crisis book, I document how time with fathers prior to the age of 11 increases children's IQs. It also increases children's telomeres, which are the most important single predictor of life expectancy. Yet in both the UK and the US, 1 in 3 children grow up without a dad. Let's look at what I call the new final solution, suicide. The results of a 20-country study concluded, quote, if you could make male mortality rates the same as female rates, you would do more good in terms of life expectancy than curing cancer. The average global life expectancy for girls is about 7% greater than for boys. In 1900, the difference in the US was only 1 year. Around most of the globe, it was about 1 year. One of the biggest contributors to this life expectancy gap is suicide. An article in the medical journal Lancet calculated that suicide now takes, quote, more lives than war, murder, and natural disasters combined, stealing more than 36 million years of healthy life around the world. In many countries, the rate of increase in suicides is growing faster for men than for women. For example, the rate of increase in male suicide in India is growing at more than 9 times the rate of female suicide in India, 37% versus 4% since the year 2000. In the US, boys and men's life expectancy has decreased each year for the last 3 years. It's the first time in recorded history that with all the improvement in medicine and science and technology that we have, that any sex's life expectancy has gone down even for 1 year. Boys, men's has gone down for the last 3 years in a row, so it's not just an aberration. In the US, I'm sure most of you have a sense of this. Mass shootings have increased threefold since 2011. Our headlines shout that the reason for the mass shootings is that it's poor family values, it's access to guns, it's violence in the media, it's violence in video games. But women live in the same homes with the same access to the same guns, the same violence in the media, the same video games, the same family values, the same socioeconomic background. And girls are not doing the shootings. Boys are. We'll be seeing why in a little while. But it's not just boys that are doing the shooting. Anybody want to guess what characteristics the boys have that lead to the shootings besides being boys? Single moms, or put another way, dad deprivation. The exact statistic is a little bit hard to track. The research I've done on that is somewhere around 75 to 90%, depending on how you calculate various things, but you get a sense of that. I think one of the amazing examples of that is Stephen Paddock. Do you know who Stephen Paddock is? He's the fellow that did the mass shooting in Las Vegas, killed 58 people, and injured 580 some odd people. His father had escaped from prison. Stephen was hoping his father was going to come home after his prison sentence ended, but instead he escaped from prison. So he was then put in another prison. Toward the end of his sentence, he escaped again. So he's put in a high security prison, one of the highest security prisons in the United States, and he proved his genius by escaping from that prison rather than coming home to Stephen. Stephen was so hurt, so angry, so disappointed that he orchestrated the largest mass shooting in U.S. history, killing 58 and injuring over 500. And I think it was Stephen's way of saying, Dad, I am a genius like you are. Dad, I am your son. Dad, I belong to you. I am worthy of you. I'm worthy of your attention. I will get your attention. You'll see that I matter too. Dad, come home to me. Why did you leave me rather than escape from that security prison and have to go hiding and not come back to me? And I find, as I study boys who have done mass shootings, that they don't only just hurt us, they hurt. Boys who hurt often hurt us. Besides drops in IQ and life expectancy and increases in suicide and mass shootings, is there really other evidence of a boy crisis? Yes. The International PISA, the Program for the International Study Student Assessment, tests boys falling behind girls in almost every academic area in all 56 of the largest developed nations. Notice one word in that sentence. What was common to the nations? Developed, exactly. Developed, I began to see that as I studied different developed nations, that they all had something in common. As nations got more successful, they allowed people more permission to have two things. One is permission for divorce, and the second is permission for women to have children without being married, without there being social stigma on that. So in the United States today, 53% of 53% of women under 30 who have children without being married. And overall, it's 40%. And so in those two areas, the women who have children without being married, and in the divorce area, I found that the children of divorce who do not have contact with their fathers, those are the ones that are subject to the 50+ different problems that come when children do not have involvement with their fathers that lead to the boy crisis. The other group, children of women who haven't been married, some of those children don't even know who their father is. Others know their father very minimally. Others do know their father because the mother and father were living together when the child was born. But statistically, those couples only stay together an average of 3 to 4 years, and then the children feel abandoned by a father that they got in touch with, but they don't see very much after the 3 or 4 year period. And so as I studied those children compared to others, I found that that the boy crisis resides where dads do not reside. This doesn't mean that if you have a divorce, that you can't do something to prevent it. I have a section in the Boy Crisis book called The 4 Must-Dos of Divorce. And the number one must-do of divorce is that there's an equal amount of time for mothers and fathers to be involved with the children. The number 2 is that dads and moms live within about 20-minute drive time from each other, so the children don't resent the parent that they're going to because they're missing a soccer game or they're missing a birthday party or something like that. Number 3, that the children are not able to detect any bad-mouthing or negative comments from mother to father or father to mother. And number 4 is that the parents be in consistent couples communication or relationship therapy counseling for years after the children are divorced. So the children, as they see better communication from their parents, have better chance of communicating more effectively themselves and not repeating the cycle that leads to the children being divorced. So that's the hopeful sign. And those children do almost, not as well, but almost as well as children of intact families. Children with minimal or no father involvement, I will call them, and I call them in the Boy Crisis book, dad-deprived children. And I encourage you to use that word. It helps people really feel the emotion of that. They experience problems in more than 50 areas. Not 15, but 50 areas, some of which I'll discuss today, and the rest are in the book. Although this talk is on the boy crisis, I want to really start out first by saying that daughters of divorced and unmarried mothers who are dad-deprived also suffer in most of these 50 areas, especially in relationships with boys, and they're much more likely to become pregnant out of wedlock as teenagers. But overall, they suffer less intensely than boys. Sometimes I'm asked, why is that the case? And I think 2 of the many reasons why that's the case is that the girls at least have a female role model to know what it's like to be a female in the single mom. And girls have a lot more permission to be able to express their feelings, cry when they're upset, they're hurt, and there's nothing that makes us respond biologically, whether we're a male or a female, to a girl or female who cries. And so when a woman expresses her feelings, she's attended to, she's cared for, whereas men tend to not express their feelings, but repress their feelings. And so, or they act out in an angry way. And so we start punishing them for the way they've acted out, and we ignore the hurt behind what led to the acting out. Boys' weakness is our facade of strength. I ultimately defined 9 causes of the boy crisis. Some of the causes, such as a 50% reduction in sperm count among males, are not triggered primarily by dad deprivation, but the great majority of these are either caused by dad deprivation or magnified by dad deprivation. One of these that's really crucial to be aware of is what I call the purpose void. In the past, a boy was not respected as a man unless he adopted 2 rigid senses of purpose. One is be potentially disposable as a warrior, or potentially disposable as a sole breadwinner, like a coal miner, a firefighter, a logger. 93% of the people who die in what I call the death professions are male. A requirement of being thought of and respected as a male was to risk being disposable. One of the reasons we don't care about the boy crisis is because, historically speaking, every country's survival was dependent upon our sons being willing to be disposable. And it's very hard to psychologically attach to someone you may lose. If your life is dependent upon someone else being willing to die for you, it's hard to emotionally attach to them living. But as fewer boys are needed as warriors or sole breadwinners, millions of boys are experiencing a purpose void, often leaving those boys unmotivated. So boys' purpose void is also a contributor to the boy crisis. For dad-deprived boys, though, the purpose void is magnified by the dad void. When you have those two together, that's when you begin to trigger a major problem. Without a dad's guidance, a boy's testosterone is more vulnerable to being channeled destructively, for example, by an authoritarian gang leader or a drug dealer. When there is dad involvement, for the first time in history, the dad is now free to help the son fill the purpose void by helping the son discover his unique self rather than the straitjacket he had to fit into in order to be disposable as a warrior or as a sole breadwinner. So this children involved with their dads today have an opportunity that we've never had in the history of males and females for boys, which is for boys to be able to discover themselves, not just to discover as human beings, rather than just discover themselves as human doings. What do I want to do to earn money, to be a success object, is no longer absolutely necessary if you have a father around and a mother working together to help the boy both discover himself and then have, as we'll see in a minute, the discipline after he discovers himself to be able to achieve what he feels he wants to achieve. That's the great opportunity of the purpose void. But for reasons I'll be exploring in a few minutes, that great opportunity is usually not fulfilled unless the father and the mother are engaged in what I call checks and balance parenting, taking the best of what mothers have to offer, which is usually protection, nurturance, unconditional love that's made apparent, but the fathers have to offer, which is oftentimes boundary enforcement, discipline, and unconditional love that is not so apparent, but still unconditional love. So to really get deeply into this in a way that is really core, to understanding what types of laws should be made around this and what types of social changes we are going to need, I think we need to answer two questions. One is first, exactly what are the consequences of dad deprivation that lay the foundation for boys who hurt to hurt us? And secondly, exactly what is dad-style parenting and why does it help children as much as it does, and why aren't dads explaining to moms what the value of their parenting is? So let's first look at the consequences of dad-style parenting. I guess I just have to say before I go on this, what I'm going to be sharing with you now is not easy for me. I was on the board of directors of the National Organization for Women in New York City, and I guess I was probably the world's leading male feminist. I spoke all around the world, paid very, very well to speak on behalf of feminist issues. And when I first began to discover that children benefited a great deal after divorce when they had father involvement, and I presented that initial information to my board members now in New York City, the National Organization for Women in New York City, in the early 70s, I could feel the chill in the room about, are you the person we have been supporting? Are you the person that's our spokesperson? Are you really wanting to say that you want fathers involved rather than women having the freedom to be able to raise children by themselves if they want to? We're here for women's rights and women's freedom to be able to do whatever they wish to do. Are you objecting to this? I'm saying, well, I'm very much supportive, my response was, to women having freedom of choice. But when a woman makes a free choice to have a child, she makes a free choice to put the child's interest above her own. And so, and they said, well, if we do that and we suggest that, we're going to lose many women who want the freedom to be able to raise children by themselves if they wish to. And that's going to undermine our political base. And we have a lot more issues to fry than just custody issues. And I said, for me, that's not acceptable. And they said, well, the research is only very much beginning now. Why don't you do more research? But it was crystal clear to me that if I did more research and I found that dads were really important, that was the end of my career as the world's leading male feminist. And I went from 50 speaking engagements per year to 0, recommended by feminists. And so what I'm sharing with you now, each one of those findings is a finding that came hard because I knew what it was doing to my career. So, but I will share these with you. The consequences of being either dad enriched or dad deprived. Boys who are dad enriched do better in math and science and most subjects, even when they come from more poorly ranked schools. That's very important because we often look at poverty as being the main cause of children's failure. In fact, when boys come from wealthy areas, they do worse if they don't have father involvement than children coming from poor areas that do have father involvement. Among boys raised predominantly by dads, only 15% have ADHD for reasons you'll see in a few minutes. Among boys raised predominantly by moms, 30% have ADHD for reasons we'll see in a few moments. The more a child is involved with their father, the more they are likely to be empathetic. We don't usually think of empathy as something that a father transmits. I'll share more about that in a minute. Dad deprivation, on the other hand, is the greatest single predictor of a boy committing what? Suicide. So when boys and girls are 9 years of age, they rarely commit suicide, and when they do, it's about equal. And so between the ages of 10 and 14, boys on average, this is US data, but it's usually pretty close to that in other countries around the world. Between the ages of 10 and 14, boys commit suicide at twice the rate of girls. Between the ages of 15 and 19, it is at 4 times the rate of girls. Between the ages of 20 and 24, it is 5 times the rate of girls. Then it levels off at 4 times, and then it begins to go up again toward the end of life. When boys are boys, well, in every man there's a boy. When men are 85 or older, they commit suicide 1,750% more frequently than females of their own age commit suicide. Can you imagine? How many have heard that statistic before? Here's a group that's experts, more than the average population of that. Only 4 in the group of maybe 150 have heard that statistic. If that statistic were reversed and girls and women were committing suicide over the age of 85 at 1,750% greater than men, is it possible we wouldn't have heard that? No, it isn't. Dad deprivation is also the greatest predictor of a boy being addicted to drugs. Dad-deprived boys are much more likely to drink excessively, be bullies, and be bullied. Both the bullies and the bullied have amazingly similar characteristics, including low self-esteem. In addition to doing worse on every subject and being both expelled and suspended, it is also the biggest predictor, dad deprivation is, of a boy dropping out of school, becoming alienated, rudderless. And boys who drop out of school in high school, they're 20% plus likely to be unemployed in their 20s. Boys who are unemployed, what do they tend to do? Steer crime, exactly. Boys who commit crime. So we have, in the United States, we have thousands of women's centers. But we also have a special name for men's centers. The men's centers are called what? Prisons, exactly. What did somebody say? So the prisons in the United States are 93% males, but most people know that, but what they don't know is that the 93% males are those, about 90% of them are dad-deprived males. When I ran for governor of California and explained to people, to prison populations, the value of fathers, these prisoners, tattooed, muscled, tough, came up to me crying and saying, I always thought I was deserved to be in prison. Now I realize that I want to be able to get out and help my children not make the mistakes I made. It was like I had breathed purpose into their life. It was amazing to see the other side of that tough guy. Men's weakness is our facade of strength. A study of ISIS recruits done by 3 female sociologists found that ISIS recruits were not just 90% males, they were also 90% dad-deprived males and females. The females who were ISIS recruits also were searching for purpose that they didn't get directed well by the lack of a dad. These boys hurt. We have to remember that mass shootings, joining ISIS, committing crimes, they're the result of people who are hurt, who are damaged, who have not been brought up in a way that gives them a sense of purpose. Ironically, in the United States, with our addiction to guns there, the availability of AR-15 style assault weapons is actually making us care more about boys because they make it easier for boys who hurt to hurt us. Second, I promise is the answer to a second question. Exactly what is dad-style parenting and why does it help children, especially when combined with mom-style parenting, or what I advocate most, which is what I call checks and balance parenting. I discuss in the Boy Crisis about 10 differences between dad-style parenting and mom-style parenting. Let me start with roughhousing, for example, and I'll actually end with roughhousing too. But so when a dad roughhouses, oftentimes the dad will say something like, "Okay, kids, time to roughhouse," and then they'll throw the 3 kids onto the couch, and maybe Jimmy, John, and Jane are all going on the couch, and the mother is looking on and saying, "Oh my God, this is I feel like in the dad I have just one more child to monitor here," and the mother's trying to say, "Now wait a minute, don't be controlling. The kids look like they're having fun, but I just feel in my gut, my intuition, I feel like sooner or later somebody's going to end up crying or somebody's going to end up hurt." Well, she's only about 99.9% likely to be right. And so and so the father says, okay, you guys, here's the game. You jump on my back and you try to turn me over and pin me down before I pin the three of you down together, okay? Okay, Dad, okay, Dad. And so the kids jump on the dad's back and they try to turn him over, but in the process of doing so, the one child sticks his elbow into his sister's eyes. And Dad goes, whoa. That's not okay. You gotta stop doing this. And so the daughter, let's say, starts crying. And so Mom is looking on, saying, "Oh God, finally." He saw that his roughhousing is going to result in the children crying. Now he'll stop. He must have learned his lesson. Does Dad stop? No, he goes back. She says no, right? And Dad goes back to the roughhousing, and Mom goes, he really is a child. And now Mom is beginning to feel guilty because she intuited that was going to end up in somebody hurting themselves or crying. And she's now feeling like she's not being a responsible mom by not having intervened. But on the other hand, she doesn't want to intervene because she's too controlling. So she feels caught between a plague and a cholera. And so she is really kind of beside herself. And she doesn't understand why Dad is going back to the roughhousing, but he does. And so he says, he's told the children, so there won't be any more roughhousing if you stick your elbow in your sister's face or you sort of get too aggressive like that. Okay, Dad, we got it. So they go back to roughhousing. Now the children are engaging in emotional intelligence under fire. Under fire, will they remember the warning of don't stick your elbow in your sister's face? And the answer is usually what? No, because the power of the excitement of winning is so great that the children forget the intellectual warning of don't stick your elbow in your sister's face. So now the children go back despite the promises and they stick the elbow or they do some equivalent metaphorically in the sister's face. And Mom is again sitting there going, I can't believe this. And Dad goes, okay, no more roughhousing tonight. Oh, that means he's going to do this tomorrow night? And yes, he's going to do this tomorrow night. And dads, moms don't understand what's going on, and dads don't understand what they're doing, and they don't understand why what they're doing is so valuable, which I'll explain in a second. The dads just continue the roughhousing tomorrow night. But tomorrow night is when the payoff comes. Now, the children have learned that last night, when they continued this process, they lost the roughhousing when they were too aggressive and not assertive. So now when Dad says, the roughhousing will end if you do something like you did last night, and so now when the children hear Dad's warning that the roughhousing will stop, they're now having a different type of competition. The fun of roughhousing is now competed, and the fun of pushing their brother or sister aside to win is now competing with the loss of roughhousing. The loss of roughhousing is more important. So the children begin to absorb that they're going to lose it because last night they lost the roughhousing when they didn't pay attention to being assertive, not aggressive. And so what we find from the data on this is that what's happening here is that the roughhousing is creating a bond with the children. The bond with the children makes the children less resentful at the boundary that is being set, as long as the boundary is enforced. If Dad didn't respond by enforcing the boundaries, then the dad would not have been effective. But by stopping and saying, that's the end of roughhousing tonight, we'll pick it up again tomorrow, but tomorrow if you do the same thing, it's going to be the end of roughhousing again. So the children now have in the back of their minds the competition with, I'd like to stick my elbow in my sister's face so I could win at roughhousing, but I'm going to lose the roughhousing fun. So now that's a worthy competition. When Mom says some version of that, usually when the children disobey, Mom repeats the warning. So for the children, having fun and being aggressive is not a big problem because it's much more fun. It's all they have to deal with is another warning from mom. So they just go ahead and they do that. And mom's looking on saying, wait, after this develops for a while, the dad often has to just say once what he wants and the children obey. Now that's really frustrating for many moms because they look at it and they say, I spend far more time with the children than the dad does, and yet I have to say things over and over and over and over again, and I feel disrespected. And I don't feel I feel really hurt by that. But because she knows the children are having fun, she represses the hurt that she feels about being disrespected and just sort of quasi-accepts it, but it hurts. And one of the reasons it hurts is because if a dad is one of those rare dads that reads about parenting, he will not find this type of information in parenting magazines. This is not what sells. And so dads don't even know the value of what they're doing. They don't know that that roughhousing with boundary enforcement creates bonds that allows for children to be more likely to be empathetic. The more children spend time with dads, the more, as I said before, they develop empathy. And this is an example of that dynamic. They also learn the differences between being assertive versus aggressive. That sticking the elbow in your daughter in your sister's face is aggressive, but it often takes 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times for this to happen in real life experience, for the children to get that distinction between exactly what is assertive and exactly what is aggressive. Oh, this is aggressive and this is assertive. This is leverage. That is aggressive. But you cannot learn that from a lecture. You have to learn that from experiences. And dads are usually okay with a child hurting themselves a little bit, is they know they have, and crying a little bit, and the person who loses having a temper tantrum, and saying, you can have that temper tantrum for about another 2 seconds, and then we move on, or you get left out. And so the consequences, the tough love that are part of dad parenting, are very important. And they're very important for this reason. What's happening in the dynamic that I just explained is that the dad is saying, you can't have what you want, more roughhousing, until you do what is needed. What the child is being taught is postponed gratification. Postponed gratification is the single biggest predictor of a child, boy or girl, being successful or failing. And so boys and girls that don't have postponed gratification, they go to school and they start doing their homework, and they get distracted by the next text that comes in. And so they don't do as well in the homework. And do they get what? More or less praise from their teachers? Less praise from their teachers. And so they begin to feel badly about school. Then maybe the boy is tall or a good soccer player, but he doesn't make the team because he doesn't do the discipline of the drills, or is a musician but doesn't make the band because he doesn't have the discipline to do that. And so the postponed gratification leads him or her to fail in school, to fail in sports, to fail in activities, whatever his or her dream is. Now, moms are usually especially good at helping children and their boys identify their special characteristics and their dreams. And so the children, in response to mom's encouragement, often go after their dream. They try to become the musician, the scholar, the sports figure. But they usually fail at their dreams, or often fail at their dreams, if they don't have that postponed gratification. And so if there's not a dad doing that tough love type of rough style parenting that leads to that postponed gratification, there tends to be, after a while, a fear on the part of the boy of dreaming again. Because the last few times he's dreamed, he's just failed and he's looked like a fool. And boys don't like looking like fools. Women don't date fools. And so when it comes to boy-girl time, the boy finds that the girls are interested in dating winners, not losers. And so he turns to porn. And porn is access to a variety of attractive women without fear of rejection at a price he can afford. But the problem with porn, among many problems with porn, is that it addicts him first to the beautiful woman, then to missionary sex, then to more and more advanced or risky type of sex. And sooner or later, he does attract a woman to his home, and she feels like an object out of a porn movie because she is an object out of a porn movie. That's all that he is able to be stimulated by this point, because each time he gets desensitized to one level of sexual pleasure, he then needs more stimulation to get to that next level of sexual pleasure, because he hasn't learned to increase his dopamine from talking with women in emotionally nuanced ways and appreciating what women have to offer aside from the sexuality. And so he's far more likely, dad deprived, to be addicted to porn and objectify women and not have an understanding and respect for women. He's more likely to do worse in school, and therefore more likely to withdraw into video games, not in a healthy way. A certain amount of video game involvement is actually very healthy, but in the unhealthy and addicted type of way. And so after a while, he's beginning to feel like girls don't appreciate the sensitive, caring, bright boy mom says I am. But yet mom says that girls want sensitive boys. But they're going out with the rugby players, the sports stars, the guys that are taking the risks, not the guys that are sensitive, warm, tender, loving. And so that makes him feel angry at women, angry at him, which is really a surface for angry at self. And then it makes him feel like the teachers don't respect him, the male peers don't respect him, females don't want him. And his mom and dad are not making such positive comments about him. They're not speaking with him with pride in their voice. Anger begins to build. He withdraws. He becomes alienated. He becomes addicted either to video games, porn, or alcohol, or drugs, or in the United States, opioids, and is likely to die from opioid overdose at a much greater rate than girls are. Or his anger goes down a slippery slope to the next level. He's so disgusted in himself, he commits suicide. Or when he decides he wants to commit suicide because there's nothing left for him in life, he looks at the fact that he's going to want to end his life, and he's also angry and hurt about all the people that have rejected him, that have never given him the time of day, that have never said, Jim, you seem to be isolated. Is there anything you want to talk about? And when he said no, they didn't pursue him and really care like he felt that they should care. And he wants to get back at them. He wants them to pay attention to him for a short period of time. So I'll go around and I'll do a mass shooting, and that'll teach them, that'll make them say, why didn't I ask Jim more about himself? Boys who hurt us. In the United States, we have a hard time with that because the solution to the mass shootings is two things. Dads in, guns out. Liberals are not very into dads in, and conservatives are not very into guns out. The outcomes of this, I mentioned about ADHD, also so many outcomes of this type of difference in mom and dad style parenting. One of them is bedtimes. Moms, when children live predominantly with moms, the data shows that moms set bedtimes earlier than dads do. Like moms will do 8:30, dads might do 9. But children get to bed earlier with dads, even though the bedtime is set late. Because dads say the bedtime is this time, and then whatever isn't done, your homework or whatever, gets neglected if the children don't go to bed. In other words, they enforce the boundaries. Whereas the children realize that with mom, if I haven't done my homework, mom will say, oh, okay, it's 9 o'clock. I know I said that bedtime is 9 o'clock. Okay, you haven't done your homework. I don't want you to go to school tomorrow without doing your homework, so now do your homework. And now it's 9:15. And then the child says, well, I finished my homework. Can I have that bedtime story? All right, you did your homework, bedtime story. And before you know it, the bedtime is later, than a half hour, 45 minutes later than originally set by. And so those are just some examples of the differences in dad and mom style parenting. There's a couple of questions that one really needs to know the answer to, but I'm not going to have a chance to get into today, but if we have a chance later, I will answer, which is, what can single moms do? I'm happy to ask that question if asked. What can schools do? And how do we develop communication that is non-defensive so that parents are able to feel more in love, be good role models for children in communication, and therefore have fewer divorces, and therefore have more dads and moms involved together, and have checks and balance parenting actually work, because checks and balance parenting is dependent upon good communication. What I'm going to look at in a second, though, is what's behind all of this and why we don't care about the boy crisis. But I've been keeping you sitting for a moment, so I'm going to be asking you just to stand up for a second and turn to the right and to give the person in front of you a good shoulder massage. This is what happens when you bring someone in from California. So I'll ask you to, there's a fellow back here who must be afraid of shoulder massages. So don't leave this guy out. He looks like a nice smile on his face. Give him, the guy in the cream sweater there, give this guy a shoulder massage. There we go. And tell the guy in the behind you whether you want it harder or softer. Lower is not okay. And now I'll ask you to turn around and massage the person who has been massaging you. Okay, give yourselves a hand and sit back down. You can always tell a really open person, like Karen here in the front row, when she got a massage, she knew enough to take her jacket off and to really get somebody to be effective with her. So, okay, here goes. Historically, families and nations survived by training our son to die, as I was sharing before. That is, training our sons to be disposable in war or at work. We seduce. How did we do this? Men maybe not. Are men that stupid that they just be willing to die to be called a man? Actually, yes. We seduced our sons to do this by social bribes. Social bribes such as calling them a hero if they risked their life to die. And then if they actually were killed, rather than just risking their life, and they did die, what happened to their heroism? Did it go up or down? Up. So the death itself only increased the way they would be respected, the legacy they would leave, the way they would be looked at as they looked at their grandfather on the mantle who had died in war X or Y, and then saw that grandfather was really wonderful. I'll just answer in a few minutes. In war, disposability is obvious. At work, if a man is a dad and not well educated, he may seek to be able to support his family by joining the death professions, because as a rule, given an equal amount of education, the death professions often have what I call the death profession bonus. And so he learns to work and choose to work in maybe some of the most professions where he's most likely to be killed, which are in the United States and probably in Norway, logger, roofer, fishery worker, long-distance trucker, all of which are about 90 to 100% male. If he's an educated executive, he risks, as the Japanese put it, karoshi. Karoshi is Japanese for death at the desk or death from overwork. Now, some young people are having what I call boys' uncommon wisdom. In Japan, the boys and girls play a game called karoshi. And karoshi has a Mr. Karoshi character. And the job in that game is to climb the ladder, to get to the top of the ladder as fast as you can. And the person who gets to the top of the ladder, he wins. He commits suicide. Not in real life, but in the game. The uncommon wisdom is what? That following the traditional male ladder to the top of the power that feminists call power is not power. It is feeling obligated to earn money that someone else spends while he dies sooner. And so that game just gives him a nice little metaphor for what happens when you make it to the top of the ladder. You've lost so much in life, you might as well commit suicide. It is not power, but it's the definition of powerlessness. The Japanese kids are beginning to get that. The problem is, when they get that imitating their dad's method of getting power is not power, but suicide of a sort, what else is there? And so that becomes the value of a father and mother working together to help the child find purpose and find a way of feeling good about themselves other than just climbing a ladder to the top by earning money someone else spends while they die sooner. What the children start learning is, and what the Japanese children are discovering, is that your parents saying, I'm proud of you when you're successful. I'm proud of you if you become a doctor or a lawyer. That those are social bribes to help you not discover yourself, but to help you discover which way you can be the best success object, which way you can be not a human being, but which way you can be a better human doing. And that one of the great gifts of the women's movement has been to expand the understanding of what a woman can be. She can work full-time, she can be full-time involved with the children, she can do some combination of both, she can do it all together, she can do it serially, and we'll still respect her, unlike what we used to do 50 years ago. But with boys have three. We've created a world where we have a world of a multi-option women. Women can do those three options, and what I call the world of no-option men. Although men do say, I have three options too. If I have children and a wife and we have a baby, babies, I have three options. Option one is I can work full time. Option two is I can work full time, and option three is I can work full time. Or if he's a working class man, work two jobs, or an executive, work overtime. And we haven't questioned that for men. We're still in that modality for the great majority of men and women that are living together or married. What virtually every boy then learned, and here is, I hope, the key to what I'm saying, what historically, what almost every boy and man learned was not intelligence, but heroic intelligence. Heroic intelligence is a type of intelligence that requires successful men, if they're going to be successful, to repress their feelings, not express their feelings. It's the opposite of health intelligence. To become human doings is the goal of heroic intelligence, not to become human beings. Heroic intelligence is socialization for a short life. Health intelligence is socialization for a long life. We hear the words toxic masculinity. There are many parts of traditional male training for heroic intelligence that are toxic in part. All of those toxicities have the other side of the coin of creating strength that is also necessary for to be an effective human being as well. But when you're only trained for heroic intelligence and not trained to combine the best of heroic intelligence with the best of health intelligence, then you're not training yourself to be the maximum human being that you can be. Intellectual feminists have blamed men for toxicity rather than thanking men for the sacrifices that have led to that toxicity, and participated in supporting men to make a transition from the expectation of the heroic intelligence to an opportunity to be fully engaged in health intelligence, which is a longer physical health and more nuanced emotional health. And ultimately, this is undermining women, because the women that I know who are heterosexual want to marry men who have deep levels of emotional intelligence, and the more the woman earns, the more women will be looking for that type of man. The hero paradox is so deeply embedded in many men's psyches that they'll forfeit life even when there is no pay. In the US, volunteer firefighters are 97% men. Is that true in Scandinavia? Oh, you don't have volunteer firefighters in Norway. You have just firefighters, right? Volunteer firefighters, basically, how do they get paid? They get paid by social bribes. People respect them, they praise them, they feel like they have purpose. But that's social bribes seducing one into heroic intelligence rather than some combination of heroic and health intelligence. I promised you some good news that's happening in the United States at the end. For 8 years, I worked to try to get the Obama administration to create a White House Council. They had called me and asked me if I would be an advisor to the White House Council on Women and Girls because of my background with NOW. And I said I'd be happy to, but I felt that there was also a need for a White House Council on Boys and Men. And so they said, well, get a proposal. So we got 30 some of the country's experts on boys and men's issues, put together a proposal, ran it up the ladder, and it got rejected just before it got to President Obama. And then I approached 7 of the Democratic presidential candidates, tried to get them to bring up the boy crisis as an issue in their debates, but that failed. So I then approached the White House and asked them to get involved in this process, and they responded, yes, they would. And I've had 4 meetings with them, and their response has been to that right now it's at the stage where it's no longer a question of whether or not there'll be some version of putting the boy crisis forward as a major political, social issue next year. They've asked me to write a portion of the Trump's State of the Union message that relates to the boy crisis. And they'll probably chop it all up, but at least some of the things that I wrote, I hope will squeak through. And so this is not because I love Trump. I have quite that. He is a good example of the type of masculinity that I hope ends for boys at the age of 8. But on the other hand, there is an understanding among many political conservatives that fathers are important and families are important. And if this issue can be put out there in a credible type of way, I'd like to work to make that happen. And so I can tell you that it looks like next year is going to be a very, very big year for boys and men's issues. I've been... Thank you. So we're working on programs called Father Warrior programs, where we're training men to be good fathers from a very early age, creating of emotional intelligence by having boys and girls both be involved in communication skills training in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, all throughout elementary school. Working on a male teacher corps to get male elementary school teachers to be trained and given scholarships like we do for women in the STEM professions, the science, technology, engineering, and math professions, so that we have equal numbers of male and female elementary school teachers. and working on programs to give single moms resources to get dads involved or to get stepfathers involved, know how to get stepfathers involved, which is very, very difficult. Almost no mother that I've ever met knows how to equally involve a stepfather. And so these are all how to get involved with faith-based communities, how to get involved with scouting, how to get involved with sports in effective ways, what the value of dad-style parenting is. So in conclusion, we've seen that as developed nations have solved one problem, survival, they've allowed new freedoms that have created new problems. And basically the boy crisis has grown in the fertile soil of families without fathers. We've seen but a dozen or so of the more than 50 ways that I discussed in the boy crisis that dad-deprived boys are indeed deprived. We've seen that boys who hurt us. And we've seen why we haven't cared about boys being hurt until they hurt us. Although our sons are damaged even more than our daughters by the loss of family, father, or any environmental, emotional connection or disconnection, every boy who is a failure to launch leaves a heterosexual woman without a man who is worthy of her love. We speak today in the safety of a building built at the cost of the safety of many men and the cost of the broken hearts of the families who love them. For the health of both sexes, I ask us to end the era of shaming men who have been willing to die so their families could live or live better. The battle of the sexes that has always been has morphed into not a battle of the sexes, but into a war in which only one side has shown up. Women, and especially feminists, have shot a lot of bullets, and men have put their heads in the sand and hoped the bullets would miss. When it comes to men and women, we're all in the same family boat. When only one sex wins, both sexes lose. I ask us to be the leaders of a new era in which everyone wins. This is the heritage I want to leave to my children. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. There's no words to describe what you've just said. You see, it's been demonstrated here that you hit the ball, you know. This was great, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now there are hundreds of questions people would like to pose to you, but of course time doesn't allow, but there will be a panel after the break, and then there will be possibility to ask and pose questions to Warren, or to praise him for that matter.
And I have to apologize. I went on longer than I wanted to or planned to, and the result of that is the audience participation experience is going to be left out. So,
this was an experience too.
This was good. I'm glad.
Good enough. Good
Again,
enough.
thank you.
Well, thank you.
Everybody was relieved. She said, "Very good."
Yeah. Well, we're all for gender balance. So the next speaker will be a woman. Now, she's also a mother of boys. So we don't quite know what spurred her interest for the subject, but the being mother of boys may have felt like there is a responsibility for creating or contributing to a life good for the boys as well as girls. And so Karen has come all the way from Canada to give us a speech. She's not as famous as Warren Farrell, but we met her in London on a men's conference in London. And she made such an impression upon us with what she said. And
job. I give my opinion
so now
on the
please
internet.
go up and talk to us.
All right. Okay, first off, I just wanted to say to Warren, I told you so, Warren Farrell. I told you Trump would do it. I told you and the whole steering committee on those conference calls, he'll do it just to piss off the feminists. So, excellent work. I'm really proud of you guys. I'm also going to, oh geez, I gotta sign in here. I have to also explain that I'm not going to give a similar speech to the one that so inspired our Norwegian friends here when they were in London, that made people cry apparently, and all of that. No, today I'm here to bum you out. And I'm going to do it in style. Thank you, Men's Forum, for inviting me. Not the most enthusiastic world traveler, but I'm always excited to talk about these issues. And Dag asked me if I would speak about men's issues in Canada. What is the state of men's issues in Canada? And you might be scratching your head wondering, you know, who cares? Right? That's Canada. This is Norway. But what I've observed in my time doing this is that one country will get some harebrained, retarded idea, pardon my politically incorrect speech, idea, and then other countries will look at that and say, oh, that seems like a great idea, and then pretty soon we've all gone somewhere in a handbasket. Don't want to know where. But is that a English idiom that you guys don't understand? You went to hell in a handbasket. So Erin Pitsey, I don't know if all of you have heard of her, but she's a veteran domestic violence figure. She opened the world's first domestic violence shelter in Chiswick, England in 1971, I believe, and immediately discovered to her chagrin that women are just about as violent as men are in their relationships. She did a tour with Senator Ann Cools in Canada, a cross-Canada tour. Senator Cools also ended up being appointed to the Canadian Senate, largely because of her work as a pioneer in domestic violence shelter services in Canada at around the same time Erin Pitsey was doing her work. So they went on a tour across Canada, and Erin Pitsey's impression of that was, this is probably the scariest place to be a man that I have ever visited. Still, it's been 30 years since she made that judgment, and so I got some good news, I got some bad news. I think I might put it in a good news, good news sandwich for you. So the good news is men's issues are actually being, they're starting to be given a fair hearing in the public square. Sadly, as in the UK and Australia and Canada, it's only the political right that seems to be, and the United States, only the political right that seems to be willing to stick their neck out and, give radio show interviews, give TV interviews. You'll see all of this stuff. I do radio show interviews in the US, AM Talk Radio. I've only ever been invited to talk on one liberal station the entire time, and I was not invited back, even though it went pretty well. But I get, between sometimes 5-15 interviews a week, just talking on, drive time radio in Pennsylvania or whatever about men's issues and boys' issues and things like that. And it's all conservative radio. So we're looking at a situation where we're having to drive the wedge in through the political right. It's the same with Senator Lionhelm in Australia. You should go look up some videos of him taking the feminists to task over domestic violence statistics and things like that. Philip Davies in the UK, member of the Conservative Party. So, what we're seeing is wedging the door open in terms of politics by getting in on the right. Now, over the last 9 years or so, the Canadian Association for Equality, they became a registered charity in 2010, and they've managed to actually host dozens of speaking events, often on university campuses, They've opened drop-in centers in several cities where men can get counseling. They can attend legal clinics to learn how to maybe apply for a child support reduction in court. They can get vouchers for hotel rooms if they're a victim of domestic violence, and they can also get vouchers for legal aid services. CAFE has also built some amazing cooperative relationships with anti-violence organizations, including feminist ones, believe it or not, and and police agencies, and they have managed to raise enough private money to open a full-service domestic violence shelter for men in Toronto. So things are looking up there. With the help of independent contractors like myself, friends in the mainstream media, and other organizations that they've liaised with, they've actually managed to get a lot of stuff done. They've opened these drop-in centers in several Canadian cities, in some places where the population is too spread out to really justify a brick-and-mortar center. They're looking at opening virtual men's centers where people can access the exact same services. They liaise with a bunch of single-issue organizations. So I would suggest that these are men's issues organizations because they predominantly serve men. But they also do not turn away women who are going through the same problems. So you're talking about the Equitable Child Maintenance and Access Society or the Parental Alienation Awareness Organization. Those groups liaise with CAFE. So CAFE's kind of become an umbrella organization, and their rubric covers a whole bunch of issues, and they liaise with a whole bunch of different single-issue groups. And like these other groups, they really don't turn women away. You can go to a CAFE drop-in center, even just it's called Center for Men and Families, and you can access assistance as a mother of children. So very, very gender neutral, I guess you would say. Now, CAFE's mainstream media coverage over the last 9 years, it went from almost 100% hit pieces, almost 100% vilification, demonization, to now it's like a mixed bag of positive and negative. But again, you're going to find most of the positive coverage of this organization in right or right of center, center-right publications. Now, the first big event that they did, Warren Farrell was the speaker at that one back in 2012, I believe it was. That's actually what put them on the mainstream map. And the reason it was news nationwide, this topic, on a very similar, it was covered most of the issues that Warren talked about today. The reason why it made national news was not because of Warren's brilliance, and not even because of the back rubs. But no, it was because about 100 protesters showed up, and they were actually organized. It was an event organized by the University of Toronto's Women's Studies Department and Canada's largest public sector union, the Canadian Union of Public Employees. So they got together. They did a bunch of speeches denouncing the event. Their stated intention was to shut the event down because they believed it was promoting patriarchy. And that was what really made the news, and that was what put CAFE on the map. And Justin Trottier, who founded CAFE, he's their president or CEO or whatever the heck you call it with a charity, he really capitalized on that. He absolutely managed to take that giant pile of lemons and turn it into, he just made media hay with it. I guess took lemons and made hay. Then, they followed that up fairly quickly with a billboard that showed a woman, a man sort of sitting like this, and his wife over top of him with her fist raised, screaming at him, that said, roughly half of all domestic violence victims are men, right? They need to be in the picture too, or something like that. And of course, that caused another nationwide controversy, and he made political hay off of that. And so this is really how they got their start. And now, at this point, they're kind of, at least when journalists look at, you know, the field of men's issues advocates in Canada, they look at me and maybe Allison sitting here in the front row, and they're like, those are the devils, right? And so we're at the vanguard, drawing all the enemy fire, and Justin and Cafe are kind of in the background actually making things happen. So it works out really well. So, and plus I really, really, really like when feminists yell at me, because, you know. Meanwhile, in Vancouver just a couple of years ago, a single woman, and this is one of the things that I hope inspires you. Her name's Diana Davison. She decided to take it on herself to start a nonprofit foundation called the Lighthouse Project. It has since become a registered charity. And she has a very specific set of talents, right? She's really good at picking through pages and pages and pages of boring court transcripts and, you know, highlighting just these tiny little details in the transcripts to figure out exactly, you know, what happened. And so she decided she was going to turn her attention to helping men who are wrongfully accused and wrongfully convicted. And so she now has intervener status in court cases. That means she can write amicus briefs in different court cases and trials. And she works one-on-one with these men. She sort of provides them emotional and moral support. She also provides sort of logistical assistance to their lawyers. She liaises with lawyers across the country to help work on this problem. So she's kind of like a one-woman innocence project, which is quite amazing for one person to have taken all of this on and to be actually accomplishing things. So I wanted to inspire you with that. There's also no shortage of work for her, but at least there's someone doing it now in Canada. Public sentiment around the issues of men and boys is evolving. So, I mean, not going by what's in the media, in the cathedral media or the establishment press or whatever you want to call it. You know, what people talk about in bars or in the line up at the queue at the cash register at the grocery store. What people have to say when you're sitting on an airplane with them. And why are you going to Norway? Well, I'm speaking at a men's issues conference. Oh, that's interesting, right? So I'm getting fewer and fewer people who are shocked, and more people who are actually familiar with the issues. They don't anymore say, men's issues? Do men have issues? They don't say that. They say, oh, yes, my brother's going through a bad divorce, or, oh, yes, my cousin hasn't been able to see his kids in 6 years, or whatever. So, you know, so they kind of know. Uber drivers, you get talking to them, and they're just like, by the time you're at the airport and they're dropping you off, they're shaking your hand and saying, thank you so much for doing what you do. So, I mean, I think that there's a real grassroots awareness starting, and this is sort of one of the things that has always... it's always distinguished us, or men's issues advocates, from feminists. Feminists always had a certain amount of establishment approval. They always got a certain amount of funding from charitable foundations and you know, like the Rockefeller Foundation and the Ford Foundation, and all those were foundations that actually funded feminist organizations, you know, kind of right from the start. You know, like, you had the entire establishment jumping on the bandwagon. It wasn't really as grassroots a movement as this is. This is really when you can be a prominent public figure and people stop taking your phone calls because you spoke about men's issues. That really means that we're actually coming counter-narrative. We are actually challenging what the establishment really would have you believe. Academia, you know, the legal system, charitable organizations, the UN, you know, all of these big, huge institutions, right? They all have what they think is what the narrative should be, and we're coming up from underneath that and challenging that. So things are getting better. They're also getting worse. Because of that head start that the feminist narrative has within all of those institutions, they've got anywhere from, depending on the issue, they've got anywhere from 50 to 150 years head start on us. So a couple of things I'm going to describe here as kind of a primer. If Norway, if you have done these things, shame on you. If you have not, it's a primer on what not to do. So while we try to raise awareness, there's all kinds of stuff going on at the top end of society in terms of, the model penal code in the US and changing laws, introducing legislation. In Canada, we, in December of 2018, a bill C-51, passed its second reading in Parliament, and I don't think that there was actually any debate at either reading. It was read, and then it was voted on, and then it was read again, and it was voted on, and it passed. It went up to the Senate for a sober second thought. I think all the senators were drunk that day. It received royal assent and became law. And since then, at least 2 Canadian judges have came out and said that in a ruling, that Bill C-51, the changes that were made, take a giant, huge, steaming dump on the charter rights of defendants to a fair trial. So maybe there's hope that it'll be undone. For those of you who are not lawyers, let alone Canadian lawyers, this bill made several changes. I hope that you can sort of follow why these changes would be foolhardy. One of the first things that it did was instantiate affirmative consent in the criminal code. This has long been the agenda of certain advocates in the United States. There's an effort right now at the American Law Institute by a small cadre of lawyers members there, who want to instantiate in the model penal code, and from there it would probably end up being made law across the country. Affirmative consent means you have to get verbal permission before every single sexual overture you might make to somebody. So if I reach out and take my boyfriend's hand or my date's hand, I've just sexually assaulted him if he didn't give me permission first. And then if he hugs me, then he's sexually assaulting me if he didn't ask for my permission first. And then if I escalate that to a kiss, I am again sexually assaulting him. And both of us are a bunch of horrible rapists. So that, just in and of itself, criminalizes everybody in Canada who's ever held somebody's hand. Another thing it did was instantiate a precedent that legally vitiates advance consent to sexual activities that might occur while you're unconscious. And this was based on a case of some bondage enthusiasts. They enjoyed erotic asphyxiation. I'm going to try and describe this situation as delicately as possible. Bear with me. But one night, they were in a long-term relationship, and they had their whole safe, sane, consensual arrangements, and the checklist of what you consent to and what you don't consent to and all of that. So they're in the course of marital relations one night. He chokes her unconscious, like she asked him to. And then while she was unconscious, he tied her up and he put something in her behind, and then 3 minutes later, she woke up, and he took the thing out of her behind and untied her, and then they went on to have hot, sweaty, steamy bondage sex for another 3-4 hours, and all was right with the universe until a couple of months later, when they had an epic end of the relationship fight, at which point he threatened, and this is actually the wording in the judgment, in the ruling by the judges, he threatened to seek custody of their young child. So she went to the police and she said, okay, well, yeah, I consented to being choked unconscious and I consented to being tied up while I was unconscious, but I sure didn't bargain for that dildo up my bum. And even though she had consented to it. And so he was arrested and he was convicted in the lower court of sexual assault based on that. He appealed because he had not gone outside the scope of her consent. And during the appeal, she admitted that she had actually made a false accusation. But the appeal court, they weren't quite sure on the whole idea of advance consent for something that will happen to you while you're unconscious. Consent in Canada is supposed to be ongoing, contemporaneous. It's supposed to be something that you have to have a constant state of mind. And so it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that no, women can't consent to anything sexual that might happen to them while they're unconscious. And so the guy went back to jail, and now you're not allowed to kiss your wife awake in Canada. That's a criminal act now. And they said, all the lawyers said, oh, it'll never happen. You'll never get some woman accusing her husband of sexual assault because he kissed her awake. And I'm like, and they said prosecutorial discretion will stop that. And I'm thinking, the precedent was based on a false accusation made in the heat of an argument where she only said it, she only went to the police because she was worried he was going to seek custody of their kid. And prosecutorial discretion didn't stop that from going all the way up to the Supreme Court. So I'm sorry. Very, very strange things going on. It's really made the lives of BDSM enthusiasts very complicated. Now, basically there were a couple of other things, and of course that's not what these two judges have a problem with. Neither of these two things have ruffled any judge's feathers. But the changes to the rape shield tests, that has ruffled, well, actually not even the changes to the rape shield tests. Now, those are basically, you can't bring in any kind of evidence of a complainant's prior sexual history if the purpose of doing so is to prove that she was more likely to consent or less worthy of belief. So you can't bring in her sexual history of, having sex with the, half the soccer team, just to say, well, so of course she would have consented to sex with the goalie too. Of course she wouldn't. Goalies are weird. But so for those reasons, you're not allowed to do it. But now they've included any communication of a sexual nature or for a sexual purpose, and any private records that the defendant might have in his possession. So let's say she texts him beforehand, I'm going to come over and give you such a good time tonight. And then she emails him afterwards and says, oh man, that was amazing. Let's do it again tomorrow. And while she's there, she accidentally leaves her day planner in which she, wrote about how she was going over to this guy's place to have hot, sweaty sex. She left it there. Well, he wouldn't be able to introduce that day planner without it being subjected to a rape shield test, or the email, or the text message. Okay, and even that is not what has these judges upset. What has these judges upset is complainants will be given standing. Complainants and or their legal counsel, which they are now entitled to, at rape shield hearings. So the complainant will be able to review any and all exculpatory evidence that the defendant has that would be subjected to a rape shield test. So basically, under Canadian law, I'm pretty sure it's like this in criminal law everywhere, the complainant is just a witness. They're not a party to the case. They're not entitled to legal representation. The prosecutor is not their lawyer. They are not the prosecutor's client, right? The prosecutor's client is the people or the people's representative. So in the United States, it would be the people versus whoever. In Canada, it's R versus whoever, R meaning Regina, the people's representative, the Queen of England. So the complainant has no standing in any other criminal case. And what we're seeing now is, I'm just going to tell you, I was involved in a court case. It was a civil case. The maximum penalty that could have been awarded, or judgment that could have been awarded, was $50,000. And Prior to the trial beginning, the judge ordered anyone who was on the witness list to leave the courtroom until it was time for them to testify, and told them that they were not allowed to be in the courtroom until they had completed their testimony, because even in a civil case with only $50,000 at stake, it is understood that being exposed to other people's testimony and to evidentiary exhibits, sitting and seeing all that, can taint the testimony of witnesses coming in to testify at a later point in the trial. But right now we've mandated, by law, we have mandated tainting the testimony of the most important witness in sexual assault trials, the complaining witness. That is the most important witness, and we are mandating showing them the defense's evidence, exhibits, and the entire defense strategy prior to the trial. So this is what finally got a bee up somebody's bonnet in Canada, although we still haven't had the constitutional challenge. So we're looking at a situation where things are happening at the upper levels where I don't have access to those levels of government and the legal system and all of that. Diana Davison is starting to manage to get some access there through the lawyers that she's friendly with. But I don't have any power to, nobody's inviting me to testify in front of the Senate. So we have this issue. And then there is another issue with a different bill. And this is where the conservatives sometimes make me very angry. This was introduced as a private member's bill by Ronna Ambrose, who was at the time the leader of the Federal Conservative Party. And it was a bill, it was passed unanimously. Every member of every party, every member of parliament voted in favor of it. But it is stalled in the Senate. It's been stalled there for quite some time, and there's no signs at the moment of it making its way any further up the chain. But when you actually think about this bill, what this bill does, Bill 337, it mandates training that is currently voluntarily an option for judges through the National Judicial Institute on sexual assault law, basically on sensitivity and the social context of sexual assault cases, and trauma-informed court proceedings and all of this. Well, I mean, we don't really know what's in it because we have no right to know what's in the training, but this is what we believe is in the training. Now, this bill will make this voluntary training now mandatory for any judge that wants to ascend the bench or any judge who wants to stay on the bench. So it will be law that our judges, all of our judges in Canada, will have to take this training. And the only problem is, back in 2017, a defense lawyer in my home province of Alberta applied to a court to force the NJI to reveal what was contained in the training. He was concerned that the training materials might prejudice a judge against his client. Well, the NJI, of course, contested this motion. They described his wanting to view these training materials as an insult to the judicial integrity of the National Judicial Institute and to the impartiality of judges everywhere. How dare you, sir, ask to see what is in this box? And the judge ruled, and you can't make this up. He ruled that because the lawyer had not demonstrated sufficiently that the contents of the training would be prejudicial, he did not have any grounds to see what the contents of the training was. So the lawyer says, I'd like to see what's in this box to see if it's dangerous. The judge says, you can't see what's in the box until you've proved to me that it's dangerous. So there we are, and none of these judges or lawyers is even considering the fact that Canadian citizens, all of us, all Canadian citizens, might have a right to know how our judges are being trained to judge us, right? So, okay, so there's the little ray of hope with Bill 337 that it's stalled in the Senate. Maybe it will not go any further. More bad news. Canada has just lost its one men's rights sympathetic politician, Senator Ann Cools. She became a victim of mandatory retirement last year. She spearheaded, over her years as decades as senator, she spearheaded attempts to raise awareness of male victims of domestic violence, and also the importance of co-parenting after divorce. So she was very, very important to our cause in Canada, and unfortunately, now she is sitting under an umbrella, being fanned by Cabana boys and drinking fruity, slushy drinks on a beach somewhere at a resort. At least I hope she is, because she deserves it. Of course, academia in Canada, that's just as infested with gender ideologues as it ever was. There's a radical feminist law professor named Elizabeth Sheehy who wrote an entire book arguing that a claim of spousal abuse should immunize a woman from being prosecuted for murdering her male partner. So, I mean, we're really looking at some crazy, crazy stuff. And, you know, she never got fired. I don't understand. So we do have a real long way to go. I know I promised you a sandwich, but I think I'm out of time, and I'm pretty much out of material. I guess I didn't write down any more good news. I thought I was gonna, but the good news is that the Trump administration has, you know, they have not just decided to go ahead with the Commission on Boys and Men. They've also rolled back a whole bunch of overreach in terms of gender equality legislation governing universities and schools, in terms of how they adjudicate sexual assault complaints and sexual harassment complaints. So I mean, like, there's a lot of good things that are happening right now, and if Warren can keep it up with the Trump administration, you don't have to like Trump. You just have to like that he hates feminists. So. But you know, like I said, grassroots people on the ground, they're starting to become aware, and they're starting to wake up. So I think maybe one way everyone here can make a difference is have one men's issues conversation, a gentle one, a subtle one, with a stranger at least once a month, and you can consider having done your part. So I guess that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. As it stands in the program, you know, it was announced that you should have a controversial speaker this time. And from what she said, I can guess that she kept her word. You know, that's very good. Thank you very much. And if there are questions or boos to Karen, you can take it during the panel, you know. Yeah, well, we never know. Yeah. There may be some feminists here, you see. We hope so, yeah. Well, lunch is coming up, but not quite yet, you know. Before lunch, we've got our a chap who's coming from closer, not from America. He's from this side of the Atlantic. Jesper Lohse is from Denmark, but he's not only the chair of the Fathers Association, he's also chair of the Nordic Father Network, and is even chair of the World Parents Network. So, welcome Jesper Lohse, and you will tell us about your catalogue of statistics of the state of discrimination or of men, boys and fathers. Varsågod.
I'll try to do that. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be in Oslo at the Men's Forum events. It's correct, I'm chairman of the Danish Father Association. I'm also in the board of ICSP, where we try to coordinate global research on children's health so we are working in a lot of different countries. We do recommendation for the Council of Europe, for a lot of nations right now, with the best researchers on children, health and shared parenting around the world. I've recently been appointed by the minister in Denmark to follow the Danish reforms, the Danish family courts for the next 4 years. So we are doing a lot of reform works in Denmark. Yeah. What I'll talk to you about today is what is right now our very specific recommendations for the Nordic law. To get there, I'll just briefly tell you about 3 other slides. 5 years ago, or maybe 8 years ago, I didn't know anything about gender equality. I didn't know there was any men and boys problem at all. I was working for Microsoft and doing software for them in 100 countries, had no idea about this problem at all. I used one day on social work, became chairman of the Danish Father Association, and suddenly something was happening there and say, how can this many people talk about all these problems? What is going on in society? There's definitely a problem. I had the opportunity to take out 1 year of my normal work and did 5 years ago what is named as a Harvard case analysis, where I didn't look at how could we earn more money, but I looked at what is all this talk about. What is the children and family systems from a leadership perspective? I looked at what is the user satisfaction in the family law and the family system. What can we actually do to increase in the Nordic countries the quality, the flexibility, and the equality of the system? And how can we decrease time and cost for children, for parents in the family system? At that time, I was working with, today I work with 7 different children ministers. So I don't think you should count on the minister being the person who will actually reform this in the Nordic countries. Ministers change all the time, governments change all the time, so the real people to talk to is the official peoples in the ministries. Those are the people doing the law, that's where you have to focus. From the research we did, or the analysis we did, there's 2 key questions that we have to be aware about. One thing is we will not change this if we don't change the family law. We are living with a law that was created in the 1920s in the Nordic countries. It was collaboration between the Nordic governments, and it's based on one parent, but we are living in a shared parenting world. The family law as we have it today will never work. That's one thing we need to change. The other thing we have been analyzing is state funding. That in the Nordic countries we can clearly see that the state funding is the other issue that can actually change these things. So those 2 things I think is very important to understand. What we did was that we initially followed the child. We gathered 1,000 family cases. We divided them up into 24 categories. That was all from public information about children to parents, all the positive stuff, paternity leave cases, and then, of course, this boys or young fathers situations, the divorce cases, and then coming into child abduction, even murder cases. So we out of these 1,000 cases, we divided them up into 25 different categories. And what we did was very easily to follow the child through the public procedures. What we found out was that a child, a parent going into the public system, if any issues about family issues, very often should talk to 10 to 15 different public authorities. They would talk to at least 50 people. We also looked at what kind of law was these people meeting. And we found out that a normal child, a normal parent, would actually be involved or would be involved in law that was created in 12 different ministries. We asked the ministries, have you even coordinated this law? And they said, no, not really. They don't have time for that. They're very busy. So what we could actually prove to the politicians in parliament was this one slide. where we followed the children through the procedures in all the positive situations for children in Denmark, but also in the most severe cases. And what we could tell the politician was that you will never get this system to work. There is absolutely no chance that this will work. If you have law in 12 different ministries, and if you have 50 different people being involved in a case. From business life, we know that every time you change hand in a human process, that's where the mistakes happen. Every time you change hands in a case or in some sort of change of product, that's where human mistakes happen. The other thing we did was that we followed the money. So we went in, we found out together, we provided the material to the state accountants in Denmark. The state accountants did more work than we did, but initially we just compared annual account sheets from the women's organizations and the father organizations. And what we found out was that the father organizations, or the children and father organizations, basically got zero money. Compared to women and children organizations that get hundreds of millions. If you get that much money, you can hire people, you can talk to politicians, you can get things into the law. That will be shown in the statistics, and it will be later on have the consequence that you get more funding. So we provided this very basic material from annual account sheet comparing women's organizations with father organizations. We provided that to the state accountants in Denmark and say something is wrong here. We found out that there was 5.8 billion of Danish crowns in social funds. Half of those funds were what we call secret funds, illegal funds. That was ministries giving out half of the social funds to people they like, knew, thought that was going to have money. So what we found out was that it was a legal practice. We found out that there was major funding for women and children organizations. And if they need those money, it's fine. I'm not going to stop it. But the practice was that it was an illegal way of doing it. It was not open. The men's organizations were not even informed that they could apply for these funds. So this system has now changed in Denmark. What I've experienced from working in about 40 countries now is that this is exactly the same in all countries. If you go in and compare the annual account sheet, you will find things like this. You will find that the funding is dramatically different. And that has a major consequence on boys and men's issues. If you don't have the funding, you cannot hire people, you cannot talk to politicians, you cannot make law proposals, and therefore it will not be shown in the statistics. So 2 things is of importance in the Nordic region. It's the family law, it's the state funding. If you change that, you will see another picture. So what we've done also is that based on this analysis, we made what we need to find a fancy word, so we call it the world's first gender equality catalog for children and fathers. But 4 hours, one Saturday morning, we sit down and we just listed all the things we've heard from the counseling. All the things about men and fathers and children, what have you heard? And we listed 348 items in 4 hours, divided them into 12 different themes. And we provided this to the politicians in Denmark and saying, something is wrong here. This is what everyone is talking about. But we just made a list and it took us 4 hours. Why has a gender equality minister, why has human rights organizations being funded by the state not created something as simple as this? To get the picture about what's going on with men and boys. This catalog has been provided to the UN as a UN examination report. So it's part of the formal work there on the examination of human rights now, not only in Denmark, but also in the Nordic countries. And of course, it's a question about the UN global goals. that if you look at the global goals number 5, it actually states that gender equality in any language for every person. If you talk to UN, you will find out that 5 or 6 parameters on the UN global goal is all about women. It's fine with me that in some countries more than others, we need to protect women. But in Western world countries, that's not the primary issue today. The primary issue and the challenge today is to create gender equality in gender equality. So based on this documentation and analysis, we are right now doing that, providing it to the UN and to the politician, and it has already created reforms in Denmark. The legal counselors for the ministers, they know that if they do not change this, they will be legally responsible. The minister will be legally responsible for violation of human rights if they do not change this law. But it has to be documented for the ministries. And that's what we have done now. So basically, there's a lot of talk about this men and boys issues. There's a lot of talk about gender equality. In my world, gender equality is about gender equality for women, for men, for boys, for girls. There should be no difference. There should be equal rights for all of them. What they want to use those equal rights for. One family wants to live like man and woman. Another family wants to live 2 men, 2 women. That's diversity. That's something that we should decide ourselves. But the equal rights need to be there. And the formula is very simple, we found out. Because the formula for proving that something is wrong and the government has to change is to take shared parenting research today, where we have all these men and boys studies that children actually need their mother, they need their father. We have research from Sweden stating that children are living together with both parents or in 50-50% arrangement, has a lower level of stress than single parenting, no matter whether it's the mother or father. So we have the research today. We also have the Human Rights Convention. That's something you don't have in the US right now, but we have that in the Nordic countries. So we have the UN Children Convention, Article 2, 3, and 7. It states that every child has the right to know and be cared for by its parents. It also states that we should always consider the best interest of the child. And as third, and that's what most of the governments or ministries forget, is that we cannot do gender discrimination. So we have, in the same situation, have to consider the father as well as the mother. We cannot try to develop laws or things like that that will only work for one parent. Also, we have the Human Rights Convention, Article 8, 14, and 17, and that says that every citizen has the right to respect a family life and has the right to be protected against gender discrimination. So what we have done with the ministries in Denmark, and we are doing that also, we have provided this to the Council of Europe, is that we have shared parenting research enough today. We have the Human Rights Conventions, and then we have this, what we call the catalog, Gender Equality Catalog for Children and Fathers. That can be created in every country. You can use 50% of the catalog we have used and just put that on. Combining those 3 things, you have actually proven that there is gender discrimination against men, against children and fathers. And suddenly the change is, now is not just talk. Now it's actually a personal responsibility for a minister that if they do not change this, if they do not create law reforms, they are personally liable towards the Human Rights Convention. They can be taken to human rights courts. And that is what is happening right now in Denmark, and I think also beginning to be starting together with our organizations in the Nordic countries. We have taken it one step further, just in the end, and we actually provided the politicians now with 3 basic principles and 10 rules for a new Nordic family law. So we have said to the politicians, no more talk. There's been a not talk about this. We need action now. And we have taken this case to the human rights courts already. They know that. We have lawyers being prepared to take them to the human rights courts right now. What we are able to do in the Nordic countries is that we are able to create a new Nordic family law. It should not be based on a single parent in a shared parenting world. It should be based on equal rights. So our recommendation for the politicians right now is that all children and parents are equal as the basic assumption. That's the level A. The next level is that any parent can decide between them how they want to live their life. So men and women have equal rights in society. If a woman wants to be prime minister or leader in a company, she should have that right. If a father is a fantastic parent, and we have fathers now, even having paternity leave on 9 to 12 months. So if that is not a question about how many, but if a woman wants to have a career in work life, or a father wants to be a fantastic or equal parent, he should have that right. If we do not make that as a consideration or basic assumption, then we cannot change things. So our recommendation is that all children and parents are equal as a basic assumption. The parents have the right to choose to make their own decisions. And if they can't agree, if one parent say, I don't think that's best, or authority, personnel, think that's not best, we will go into new family courts that have been created here since 1st of April 2019. We have created a total new family courts in Denmark, and these should be handling this case. You can go on the website, worldparents.org, and you can basically read the 10 recommendations that we are right now promoting for the Council of Europe, but also for the Danish government and the Nordic governments. And we have actually made the law to say this law will actually work. So take this law from 1920, tear it apart because you cannot use it in today's society where we have equality, and use these 10 principles to actually create a new Nordic law. This is what we need. This is what we should do. This will mean that women are equal, men are equal, boys are equal, and girls are equal. So family law is one of the things. State funding is the other thing that we need to look at. Those two things are going to change. Nothing else. Everything else will be talk. So that's what we are doing now. We are meeting every month in the Nordic organizations, and we are trying to get this out, not just to the Nordic governments, but we are doing the reforms in Denmark now, and we also provide this for the Council of Europe that has already made a resolution on fathers, and that's one of the reasons why every father in Europe will now have 2 months at least paternity leave. That's not a lot from a Scandinavian perspective, but that's part of that work also. So, in our world, no more talk. We need to get a new law, and we need to do it now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jesper. That's great. So your 10 rules, you didn't have time to read them out, but your speech and the presentation will be available on our home site, mannsforum.no for everybody. Well, okay. Thank you very much. We have another Dane coming later. He will give you the solution of all these problems, or at least half of them. So keep the tension up. But the lunch is first, and that's not here. It's in the story above. So one story above, but also when you go up, you pass the table with books, and there will be books by. I'm sorry, you're sold out for the moment, Warren. Yes, it's been very hot, So Dag will have to go to his office and fetch some more, so that we can sell after the conference. Yeah. But there are 3 more books. The one is called Samværssabotasje by Camilla Pettersen. There is another one by Dag. He's called The Man, Myths, Truth, and Lies and Truth. Yeah. And then there is, not the least, the last book on the item, which is very new. It's got very good presentation in the papers, and it's called My Life as a Man. And it's written by Øystein Stene, who's a journalist and he's also in arts and he's also an author. So it's not only a very important theme, but it's also very well written. So everybody here who speaks Norwegian or can read Norwegians, including Danes, are welcome to buy that book over here. Yeah. So, yeah. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Behind me here is Britt Aksnes. She's also written a book about men, you know. What's this called, Britt? Yeah. Yeah, so you can also buy that book. And she may give you a discount, you know, you ask her, you know. Okay, thank you very much. We're back here at 1 o'clock sharp. Okay, half an hour. 1 o'clock sharp. Thank you.